Welcome back to the Table Rush Talk Show, where we dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, marketing, and personal growth. I'm your host, Misha Zvagensov, and today's guest is John Girard, Stanford undergrad and the School of Hard Knocks, serial tech CEO, modern day philosopher,
I like that.
from leading SaaS companies to decoding quantum physics in his free time. John's here to help us make sense of the AI boom and what it really means to your business, your team, and your future. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Misha. I appreciate that. With that kind of introduction, I feel like I've got a lot to live up to in this hour.
That's a lot of pressure, isn't it?
It's a lot of pressure.
Okay, let's kick things off. Tell us exactly what you do and why it matters. And if I handed you the mic in a boardroom full of execs wondering what to do about AI, what's the first thing you'd say?
Yes. So starting with the first, I think the best way to say it is that what I do is a whole bunch of activities in the entrepreneurial space. A lot of it these days has to do with AI, but I'm a business builder, creator. I really like to be involved in companies that are doing interesting and disruptive things. In recent years, I've actually strayed quite a bit outside my sort of experience and comfort zone. I did a lot of tech companies, a lot of software companies, and I'm increasingly doing non-tech. And so I really am I'm mostly interested in building things. And so most of the pursuits that I have these days involve that. And that kind of gets to your second question. It's very hard to be involved in anything entrepreneurial these days without AI being something that you have to consider, whether it's going to disrupt your business or you need to use it or what it might be. So I actually have these conversations. I just had a conversation recently with the board about AI, and what I share with them, which isn't terribly original. This is really what most people who are closely following AI will say, is first of all, that it's real. That this is not just sort of a plaything or a toy that does funny face filters and draws nice pictures for you in Dolly and ChatGPT. It's real and it's incredibly disruptive. And that if you don't have a plan for dealing with it, you're probably already cooked. Now that applies to just about every business out there. And there are various reasons for that, but that usually at least gets a little bit of attention from people. That like, maybe I should listen to what people are saying about AI and what this John guy has to say for the next 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. If you are not looking into it, you're cooked. You're done. It's too
It's
late.
may as well just fold at this point. Just cash in your chips. There's the exit.
That is so good and scary at the same time. Um, so you said something interesting, very tech oriented before, but surprisingly now a lot of non-tech. So give me like a tech example and a non-tech example of what
Yeah,
you're
sure.
playing in
So
now.
even right now, I can tell you. So working on a company on the tech side that is helping to make sense of extremely large data sets from company and people data providers. So, as you might imagine, there's hundreds of millions of records out there about all of us and about the companies we work for and that kind of thing. And it turns out those data sets are really hard to work with at scale. So, company that I'm working on right now is helping to make sense of that for a couple of the big data providers that are out there. So that's like a very tech kind of a thing. On the quite a bit less tech side of things, I'm actually working on a project right now called Nevermind, which I'm really passionate about, and it's basically a new wellness studio concept where people are walked through an experience in sauna, cold plunge, meditation, and breath work in a fully immersive studio environment. So, really amazing kind of changing graphics on the walls, music, scents, the whole kind of thing. So, there's the span of interests in business that I have.
Awesome. So on our walks, you and I walk a bunch, and we've been bantering about AI enablement consultant and what this is, what that that looks like. What, in your words, is an AI enablement consultant?
Yeah. Well, it's first of all, it's one of the ways that I pay the bills. So even though I'm doing these very disparate things and on the project landscape, it's a great place to be exploring and experimenting right now if you're interested in AI. One of the reasons for that, by the way, is that there is nobody in the world today who has more than 2 years of applied AI or AI enablement experience. And the reason for that is that this stuff has only been around for 2 years, right? So if you think about like, how do I apply ChatGPT to my business? Well, there was nobody doing that 5 years ago because it didn't exist. So it turns out to be a really good time to get into this business because at most you're behind by 2 years right now. Like imagine if you could have gotten into the internet in the first year or two of it being a thing. Well, this is that time for AI. So, what is AI enablement? What does that mean? The best way to kind of talk about that is that in Internet 1.0, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when the internet was first being taken seriously, there was this idea of digital transformation. That was kind of the catchphrase that was being used, and really what that meant was getting all these offline businesses online. Now, in different cases, that meant different things. So, it might just mean having a pretty website where people can come and find you and see who you are. If you're a store, it might, have meant going to e-commerce. And if you are an insurance company, it might have meant, being able to provide quotes and sell insurance online, right? So there was an entire industry worth billions of dollars that got created out of that initial digital transformation. And there were players in that from the very, very top, the McKinseys of the world, all the way down to, solopreneurs hanging their shingle out saying, I can make your website. So the same exact thing is happening right now in AI world, which is to say, AI will be an important part or a piece of every single business out there in the same way that every single business has some sort of a transformation opportunity with the internet. So AI is very similar. It's going to vary dramatically. Some people will use it just a little bit and get something out of it. Some people will go all the way and their entire business will be disrupted and transformed by AI. Exactly the same as what happened, for instance, in e-commerce and Internet 1.0. So AI enablement, just to kind of put a bow on it, is the process of taking people from where they are today with like, hey, AI is cool, but I don't really know how to use it, to my whole business is fully optimized using AI. That's what AI enablement is.
That is an awesome vision. I love that. And I'm thinking now too about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever it is, internet starts coming online. There's still people today, as we record this in 2025, who are getting up to speed on the internet.
Right. Yeah.
And
It's true.
It's
I
true.
just exchanged emails with a guy with an AOL email address. That was amazing. It's been a few years since that happened.
And then also the internet is still maturing, right? You've got guys like Russell Brunson and that whole crew, the funnel crew, who reimagined websites, and now the big push of funnel website technology, call it what you want. So there's still plenty of room in the internet space. But if you think about that in regards to AI, holy mackerel, like the opportunities are endless and should be there for a while.
Yeah.
This AI blows us all up. But
Yeah. Perhaps. Right. Yeah. I think we need to consider that contingency too. Although if that's what's happening, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's like, who cares? Like
right?
we may as well build as if that's not happening. Because if it does, all bets are off.
Yeah. I like the perspective of an AI enablement consultant is a
Yeah.
brand new field, 2 years old. And
Yeah.
that just hit me like a ton of bricks right
Right.
there. Wow.
Yeah, and the way further the way to think about that is, yes, the internet is still evolving and there's still more work being done there. But at the very beginning of the internet, digital transformation, zero of those dollars had been spent, and pretty soon billions of them were spent, like over a very short period of time. So we are at that zero to billions kind of a phase, and really at the beginning of that curve, right? So the bulk of this AI transformation spending is still on the calendar ahead of us, not behind us. And that's a really big deal for somebody who is, modestly technical and wants to learn AI and get in on helping enable companies to use AI effectively.
That's a great vision and a great perspective. I love it. And it's empowering versus disempowering. Duh. But I mean, it's really is empowering for all the fear out there. It's like, well, wait
Yeah.
a minute, this isn't an empowering time.
Yeah. And it allows you to do something about it, right? Like we know intuitively or in actual fact that this is very disruptive. So what do you do about that? Well, one thing you can do about that is get out your surfboard and ride the wave, right? Like that's that when, when the really big wave comes, the 100-year storm, like, are you going to paddle out?
Oh my gosh. So good.
Yeah.
I was also thinking of all of the solopreneurs who were dabbling in the market 25 years ago, below the McKenzies. You gave that
Yeah.
chain. Like some of those solopreneurs became the new McKenzies.
Yeah, that's right. And they're, there are all kinds of firms that sort of sit below that elite tier serving smaller companies. As always happens, I'm sure McKinsey started off serving smaller businesses at one point and kind of grew into the enterprise. And so there's always that sort of space down below. And that's true here too. In this AI transformation, not surprisingly, the big names have turned on to it very quickly. I think it may have been McKinsey, I think was the first to get to $1 billion in AI transformation revenue in a quarter. And that was, I think, last year. So like the larger players, see the patterns and they know that this has happened before, but they're not going to get the mom and pops or even the mid-sized businesses. Um, and by the way, even the work that they're doing for enterprises has only just begun. So most of these companies are just barely scraping the surface of what's possible with AI.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. What are the five core buckets you see in every business that AI can touch? Maybe there's
Interesting.
more than five or less. Yeah.
Yeah, there may be more or less, but the one way to think about it is that there isn't a functional area of the business that will be untouched by AI. So you name it, it's disruptible, right? Um, if you think about the areas that are kind of most ripe for disruption right now in order, it probably starts with customer support. So the idea of having autonomous or nearly autonomous AI agents handling emails, chats, and phone calls, even phone calls, for customers. So that's the first one. Second one is probably sales. So if you look at the opportunities to optimize sales motions, to detect customer prospect sentiment, to resurface old conversations at the right time, to put together email responses, right? So AI is disruptive and very helpful there. Then we have marketing for similar reasons, the ability to rapidly generate new copy, test and iterate. We even get into the image generation side of things there and the ability to test new creative, right? So that ends up being striking and really quite interesting. I would actually put HR next. So people functions. The reason for that is that especially for companies that are doing hiring at very large scale, there's great opportunities for automation using HR. I just saw an AI interviewing tool a few weeks ago that allows an AI to have a face to bot, I guess, interview with a human and aggregate their responses and summarize that in near real time. So that's pretty amazing. Also, a lot of bots out there that are HR bots that can respond to internal questions about policies and procedures and take that burden off of an HR team. Cool company called Cascade AI that's doing that right now. So that would be the fourth category. And then I would say with the fifth category, I'm gonna kind of say a kind of in a blanket sense operations, but mostly having to do with workflow automation. So if you think about let's go back to the insurance company example, right? So a claim happens, and various steps internally need to happen in order for that claim to be handled correctly. It lands on a bunch of different people's desks. Each of them has to do something with it, and ultimately an outcome is achieved. So that's a workflow, and it's automatable, and AI can shave the time required, the human time required to do that down by say 90%. So those would be sort of the five primary buckets I would look at.
Awesome insight. How does someone know when they're ready to bring in help?
You mean AI help, or you mean like enablement, and like somebody to enable? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so I'll tell you the way it usually happens. So the way it usually happens is sort of two paths. The first one is somebody on the executive side has just seen an AI thing that blew their mind. They just saw a demo or heard a story where they're like, I can't believe this is possible. This is incredible. And by the way, a lot of times that's actually coming from the kids of these executives, because the kids are the ones playing with all this stuff, right? My son just showed me this thing that created this marketing plan for us that's better than what my marketing team did. I think I better pay attention to this, right? So that's one vector, and then the other one is the sort of fear vector. So that one is somebody just beat us in a deal, and they were 50% less expensive, and they said it was because of AI. Like, what do we do? Right. So that sort of shot across the bow moment where all of a sudden, you've gotten displaced or pushed aside, in the marketplace by somebody who's doing it right. So those are the two uh, most common places where somebody knows that they better do something about it and get somebody involved who knows more about it than they do.
Good, good. I love it. I love the vision too of the chief marketing officer sitting there
Yeah,
at
like
dinner
you're
and
fired.
yeah, and the
Right.
teenager's like, "Hey, check this out. You
Yeah.
might want to implement this at your company."
Yeah, that's it. Right.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And look, what's interesting about that too, I mean, this is the same thing that happened. We called them digital natives in Internet 1.0. These are kids that grew up not knowing what it was like without the internet. And they do different things with the technology when they grow up with it, as opposed to have to learn it like us old people. So we've got now this thing happening. I don't know that anybody's calling this, but it's the same thing, which is AI natives. So we're now, creating this new generation, call it today, maybe they're 12-year-olds, something around there. Well, they won't really remember a world without AI. What those kids do when they hit 20 to, 25, assuming the world is still here, is going to be pretty extraordinary.
It is gonna be extraordinary. Oh my gosh. I don't mean to get fatalistic, but I'm old enough now, mid 50s, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna be around to see all the amazing stuff that happens.
Yeah.
Or 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I didn't have that thought. I was like, I'm gonna be here
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, there's all the longevity people. You and I may have the opportunity to extend it another 50 years by the time we're at the end, at the normal end.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I believe this is still true, is that as far as the human lifespan, it is in effect still the same as it was,
Yeah.
millennia ago. We're just living longer within that lifespan. So the lifespan isn't getting longer. We're just pushing the envelope of how long we live within that span. Am I
Yeah.
saying
And
that right?
I think that's correct. And the other big uh, thing that's happened. So we have made like very good strides around child mortality. So average ages were actually pulled down heavily by child mortality forever. So once you made it out of childhood, most people were living about the same amount, to your point, length of life as we do right now. But the averages got pulled down because you had like a 1 in 4 chance of dying as when before year 5, which, if anybody has seen the way a toddler behaves, it's not really surprising. Like this is kind of like, I don't know how they don't, killed themselves every day. Yeah, I mean, that was mostly like disease, accidents, whatever. But yeah, that was a big driver. Um, and bringing it back to AI for a second, I mean, one of the interesting things that's happening. So a lot of the longevity people are now looking to AI and some of the methods that are available now with AI to try to sort out new treatments or sort of wellness modalities that could impact longevity. That's a very interesting kind of an area for AI. So there's at least depending on how you test it, there's now GPTs or LLMs, between OpenAI and Claude and whatever, that perform at PhD level on a bunch of tasks, right? So if you think about, if you and mostly that's applying tests that get used at that level and seeing if they can pass or not. So I don't know that it really is very effective at testing sort of the creative output of a PhD, for instance. But it's alarming and interesting. And for sure, if you could imagine, if there's a good correlation between that test taking ability and the ability to create and innovate, we could bring into the world 50,000 more PhDs in, longevity and biology to work on this problem in the next few years. And do you think they would come up with something interesting, especially if they were all networked together and able to share their findings? Like, I think they might. So that's the world we're moving into at a breakneck pace right now.
That is mind-boggling.
It is. Yeah.
All right,
Crazy.
let's call this the dot-com flashback. You were in the trenches during the dot-com boom and bust.
Mhm.
And we spoke to this a little bit, but what parallels are you seeing today in the AI space, and how does that inform the way you approach AI advisory work now?
Sure. So I think one of the most interesting things to come out of the dot-com 1.0 bubble and burst and then come back, because let's face it, like, it wasn't like after the burst that was the end of the internet, right? Even though many people thought that was it. One of the most interesting things that came out of it was something called the Gartner hype cycle. And I don't know if you've seen this graph, but basically it describes the phenomenon of, oh my gosh, there's this interesting technology that's pretty cool and hobbyists like it. Oh my God, it's going to change everything. Wait a minute, it doesn't work. Everything sucks. We're all going to die. And then, oh, actually, there's a usefulness here, right? So that's the hype cycle. And this bottom part is, I love it. It's called the trough of disillusionment, right? So we end up with this kind of being in this place of like, we thought this was going to change everything and everything still sucks. Like, this was a total disaster when it really wasn't, right? So I think, that was one of my favorite things that came out of that era, and it perfectly described that era. We like most of us. I know, do you use Instacart? Are you an Instacart guy, getting your groceries delivered to you?
No, but everyone I know is. I'm like
Everyone, you are,
the
right?
last holdout.
You're the last holdout. Okay. So like, I can use this, right, and have groceries like, on my doorstep in 30 minutes. Well, in 2000-ish, there was a company called Webvan that got created, raised a couple $100 million, and it was to deliver groceries to your doorstep. They had to set up, or they chose to set up, a very large distribution network in order to make the whole thing work. And they had a really hard time getting customers. They had a really hard time getting people to take an interest in it. So they went out of business. Web grocery delivery doesn't work. This is a terrible idea. What were we thinking? Why would anybody think that could have possibly worked? And now Instacart's a quite large business that's doing very well. Thank you very much. So we had that kind of that hype. Yes, they were doing it kind of the wrong way. It turned out that it's a lot better idea to leverage the distribution networks that already exist. So there's not a huge Instacart store anywhere. It's people who go to the stores like Vaughn's that are already there, where they've already solved the distribution supply chain problem, right? We didn't really know that in 1.0, and we got ahead of ourselves. So there it was, right? Webvan. This is amazing. It changed everything. We're living the future. We may as well be the Jetsons now. And oh my God, this doesn't work at all. Everybody sucks. Like, the internet's stupid. And then, oh, wait a minute. Instacart's actually a good way to kind of average this out and make it work. So that hype cycle applies today too in AI land. It's just everything in AI land is happening faster. So I think we're climbing the hype cycle, not coming down the other side. I think there's going to be this sucks, and what's the use of it? It's all sort of children's play. And then there's going to be the other side, which is, wait a minute, this really does change a lot, and let's see how we can leverage it.
Great vision of what it was like and where we're headed to, because it does feel like we're still in the hype cycle. I'm so embedded in AI these days and used AI to help me generate the show flow here. So I feel like I'm on the disillusionment phase a little bit because I'm like, oh, this is awesome. It's going to do all this stuff for me. Oh, wait, it still takes work. It still
Mhm.
takes
Yeah.
this.
And
Yeah,
well, those are really bad ideas. It just gave me, like, that happens a little bit. Hallucinations, all that.
yeah. What was the startup world like back in 1999?
Well, I would say the biggest difference was that um, so there was not the same easy access to infrastructure for building stuff. So if you look at, what's happened today with cloud computing in particular, you can start a new product company app, internet, like, software product company app, um, on pennies. It does not cost very much. You don't have to go and buy servers. You don't have to configure them. You don't have to, create a hosting facility or contract with a hosting facility to put your servers in. So I think that's the biggest difference, is that the cost to get started has fallen to near zero. So, it used to be that you could, in fact, one of the only ways to raise money was to go in with, like, a vision on the back of a napkin and say, this is what we're going to build, and then raise, $4 or $5 million. And a lot of that would go to building out the infrastructure, the servers that you needed in order to run the whole thing. So today you can't raise that $4 or $5 million unless you have, like, product built and paying customers, which is kind of wild. And that's a function of the fact that you can build the same thing, for pennies on the dollar, because you can leverage Amazon's servers and infrastructure, or Google's, or Microsoft's. So, it was a different era in that respect. There was a higher premium on, hardware people, like having people who knew how to actually manipulate and deal with hardware, to diagnose problems, to swap out faulty memory, like, all that kind of stuff. All that's been abstracted now in the new sort of cloud-based world. So I would say, it was a lot of, it was very physical as compared to how it is today. What was it like in 1999? We had real computers running everything, that up for the services we were providing, like, sitting in a room, like, with fans on them so that they didn't overheat.
That's what a cool perspective. And it did not even hit me until you just described it, that because I lived through that and was in
Yeah.
sales selling data co-location, rack space and server farms.
Yeah.
And yep. And we were selling rack space that was going to be built. There was such a demand for it until the
Oh yeah.
crash that people were buying rack space that was going to be built 3 years out. I mean,
Yeah.
it was ridiculous. It's almost like Web 1, 2, 3, call it what you will, was the build out of the infrastructure that we have access to today.
Yeah.
And now that you say it, it hits me that whenever I'm thinking about building something in this space or whatever, the only worry I have is, do I have a laptop that gives me access to the internet? That's
Right.
about it.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
No, that's it. I mean, and that's, like, the big difference, right? That's the big difference. And even teams building really interesting, complicated stuff are generally only worried about that on the infrastructure side, at least to start with, right? Now, I will say, one of the things that AI has done, this revolution has done, it is bring back colo facilities and hardware, right? So the demand for, GPUs in particular, and really heavy duty, heavy horsepower machines is pretty substantial. And a lot of companies end up kind of supporting their own infrastructure to make that go. The larger companies,
Yeah.
all that stuff, just like any other compute, is available, to rent. I can rent those GPU outfitted machines through Amazon or Google or whoever. But there's sort of this a little bit of a return to bare metal, to like actually having colo facilities and hosting space, and deploying your own stuff.
Yeah, I see it in the news all the time. Meta or Facebook is buying $50 billion worth of NVIDIA chips or things like that,
Yeah,
where it's pretty crazy.
yeah,
W- What lessons are still true from 1999 to today?
yeah. Well, one of this goes a little bit to kind of my, like, probably far too diverse business interests, which is, um, the rules of business apply no matter what the era, no matter what the hype. Which is to say, so I think it was Peter Drucker who may have said, the only objective of a company is to create a customer, right? So that's it. Is it to build incredible product? Not unless it creates a customer. Is it to make a whole bunch of people? Not unless they're a customer. Like if they're a customer, then yes, mission accomplished. So all of which is to say that, especially if I'll just use my own example. Um, I was young. I was working with a couple of friends and roommates from Stanford, and we were really excited about learning the VC game and going out and raising money and all that kind of stuff. We got really, really good at it. We raised a lot of money. We knew how to pitch, whatever. We did not know, however, how to create a customer. And the business did not do well as a result of that, right? Like we had optimized for the wrong thing. So what is the lesson? Well, the lesson is that, people vote with their dollars. The lesson is that if you have something that's valuable, doesn't really matter whether people say they love it or they hate it. If they pay for it, you have something valuable. If they don't, you don't. There's so many examples, especially in our early days, of people responding so favorably to what we're doing. Oh my God, I love this. This changes everything. This is the best thing. This is the best thing ever. Great. How much did you pay for it? Nothing. Like, okay, right. But in those early days, like we didn't necessarily, we were paying attention to the wrong signals, So lesson of, Internet 1.0, is amidst the hype, amidst all the crazy that's going on, if you're not creating a customer out of what you're doing, then it doesn't matter. You're not actually in business. You may be in charity. You may be in the business of giving other people's or your own money away, but you're not in business.
It's good. Let's speak directly to your dream client, the company that's out there sitting there thinking, this is the kind of vision that I need. This is the kind of thinking that I need to help me. Who is that?
Yeah. So it's a good question. I would say that the companies that are most interesting to work with in this AI enablement space are, first of all, like sort of have a history of being nimble. So they have demonstrated the ability, over prior years of adjusting quickly to new realities, rolling out new products or modes or methodologies, um, you know, uh, sort of getting together and collaborating on something important and changing in a hurry. So that's sort of a cultural bias that either exists in a company or doesn't. Nothing quite like having the opposite kind of a company where even in the face of like, look, the ship is going to crash on the rocks, people are like, okay, I gotta go, maybe we can work on this tomorrow, so somebody, a company with a culture of roll up the sleeves, get it done, so that would be the first thing. And then the second thing I think is and it's kind of related to the first, but I would say a culture of curiosity and open-mindedness, right? So a lot of this AI stuff is confusing because it doesn't make intuitive sense, right? Like it just kind of out of the box here. Okay, I've got a chat bot that responds very human-like. Like, what? So what? What does that have to do with me or my business, right? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with it, but it's not intuitive. So people who are a little more closed-minded or not curious about, like, well, what is this all about? What is this? What is this really about? What does it really mean? Are not going to have the sort of sense of urgency to actually, do something. So I would say those two qualities, a history of kind of a nimble culture, roll up the sleeves, get it done, and an open-mindedness and curiosity.
Okay. You kind of spoke to this next question, but maybe you will see it differently or see a different way to answer it. What kind of business is best poised to implement AI right now?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of all businesses, right? That's the first place to start. Like, you should, the right way to approach it is to assume that AI is incredibly important to you and maybe even existential unless proven otherwise, right? So that like, you got to kind of flip the question, I think, on this one. Frankly, most companies would have been better off flipping the question on Internet 1.0 also, you know what I mean? Like, they would have been better off assuming that the internet was going to disrupt their business completely unless and until they could prove otherwise. So that's the place to start. There really are, two primary areas where you're going to find yourself as a company in terms of AI deployment efficiencies and disruption. The first that is, by far the most important one is an existential category, which is AI or something that's AI enabled can actually deliver the product or service that my company delivers, right? So, just to say that again, AI or an AI enabled approach can actually deliver the product or service that my company delivers. So now your product and services are competing with AI. Okay. So a good example for that is maybe I'm a medical group of radiologists, right? And what I do is I make radiologists available to read MRIs and X-rays for hospital systems, and I charge the hospital systems per read, and the radiologists sit in a room and they get images that come up and they annotate and they make their diagnosis and whatever. Well, AI can do that at a better accuracy rate and 50 times faster than humans, right? So there's an example of AI can actually deliver the product or service that radiology group is able to deliver. Now, the only thing that's holding back the dam that's about to burst on that, it probably is compliance, regulatory stuff. But make no mistake about it, like that will be the end game. That AI, essentially removes the need for there to be traditional film reading, MRI reading radiologists. That's the big category, which is, there's an example, AI disrupts everything because it does what I do, but it does it better. The other category is AI is an internal enabler that drives efficiencies, but I still have something unique that I'm delivering on the product and service side that AI can't do yet. Okay. So a good example of that might be let's just say a manufacturer of widgets, right? So, AI and robotics have not yet gotten to the point where they can take over the entire factory. There's still that sort of physical factory that's necessary, and the real estate that it's on, and the raw materials and supplies and all that kind of stuff. Now, so AI can't do that. It can't actually build those products, but deployed in the right way, it can make the building of those products a lot more efficient and less expensive. So it can reduce costs around personnel by having better shift planning. It can reduce costs on raw materials by scanning the markets and making the right bets on futures contracts and whatever else. So now, and here's where the competitive bit comes in. If your competitor is doing all those things, and by doing all those things is able to reduce their prices by 15%, and you have, your margins are only 15%, you've got a real problem if you're not also deploying those efficiencies and solutions. So that's the other category. So you got, my business will be disrupted because the AI can actually do what I do better than I can, or my business needs a bunch of AI automations and efficiencies because if I don't do this, I'm not going to remain competitive. So those are the only categories that exist right now. There is no category of like AI doesn't matter, let's forget about it. That doesn't exist.
That is so crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It is crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy.
And it applies all up and down the scale. It's it's solopreneur to, Fortune 50.
Wow. Okay. AI gave me this question. What should they have in place first?
So there's a couple of different answers to this. Most people will say that you start with AI policy. And that's not a terrible idea. The point is that, the company definitely needs to take a stand on the appropriate use of AI. And sometimes that even is flipped, not in terms of what you're not allowed to use AI for, but actually mandating the use of AI. So recently and somewhat famously, Shopify's CEO came out with a little bit of screed, or I don't know what the word is, but he basically said, hey, if you're not using AI, you don't belong here. Any business decision that we're making that we're not using the AI route on needs to be justified thoroughly and approved internally before we go through with it, right? So there's AI policy of the mandate variety. Now, most companies are going to start with AI policy of the restriction variety, and that's okay too. That's reasonable. There are many businesses, healthcare is a good example, where you want to be careful about limiting the use of AI until you've got the right curbs in place and make sure you're meeting compliance needs, right? So you don't want AI to be, writing up, patient instructions and diagnoses at this point in the game. Although frankly, it probably would do better than doctors. There's compliance issues associated with that would drive the legal teams absolutely insane. So AI policy is a good place to start. A fast follow on that is, and companies can do this internally. I mean, this is something that I do in the AI enablement side, but you can do this yourself. You map out the different business units you have internally and what their primary functions are. And then you take a very open-minded look at whether it's possible to do any of those functions better with AI. So, a good example might be, okay, we're the marketing team. The marketing function exists primarily to drive leads to the sales team. Here are the 7 different ways we do that. We have conferences, we have a customer advisory group, we have cold emails, we have advertisements, we have TV commercials, whatever it might be. So you kind of you look at all those things and then you say, okay, what could I do with AI that might be able to create lift on any of these? And by the way, perhaps not surprisingly, you don't have to do this by yourself and you don't have to do this with humans. This happens to be perfect fodder for AI. So you can just say, I'm a marketing team. Here are the 7 different ways that we generate leads for our sales team. We are going to be the leader in the space at deploying AI in order to be efficient internally. We want to be globally recognized as somebody who's doing this the right way. Give me 5 examples for each of these 7 areas of ways that I could use AI to drive efficiencies. And now all of a sudden you've started to paint the picture of AI enablement and what it might drive. Now, one thing I'll say about this, if you do this right, you may have 5 core business functions and 5 to 7, sort of sub functions in each of those. So call it around 50 at the high end, actually 35, I guess. At the high end, total items here, 5 options for each of those. Now you've got a list of 175 or so, AI innovations that might work. And you can kind of see if you dig into those a little bit, you probably only need 12 or 15 of those to work well to have a really big impact on your total efficiency. Like if you find 12 to 15 of those that each contribute just 1% to the cost saving side or revenue increase side, that's a 15% move in your, P&L in the right direction with smart application of AI.
Wow. So
There's the playbook. You don't even need me. There's the playbook.
I know. Get your teenager on board.
Yeah, that's
Give them
right.
that prompt. There's the
That's
playbook.
that's
Yeah.
it. Just let them go.
Turn it over.
Yeah.
Okay. So as far as what should they have in place? You said first, most people will say AI policy, and then you kind of segued. But do we have a hard thing of what the second thing is,
Yeah. I mean,
or
so the second thing, what I would call that is what would I call that? So what I call that is an evaluation framework, right? When I'm doing it. So it's a way to sort of start to paint the picture of where AI could create levers for you in the business. So you've got a policy element, and then let's call it an AI evaluation framework, which is mapping from the business unit or department or functional area side where AI can create lift. And that it's very clarifying to do that second exercise because, if I said to you like, hey, how do you think AI could improve your business? You might go, I have no idea, right? But if you map out all five of your most critical departments and each of the seven functions that they do, and you look at those, like most CEOs will know what those functions are. And then you can start thinking a lot more clearly about like, oh, okay, so we do a lot of cold email. Could AI plausibly help here? Yeah, I could write good cold emails. Okay, look, there's a little star we'll put next to that one. So that's the way, that's the reason that framework is illuminating. It allows you to ask the question a lot more narrowly, specific to actual business processes instead of a big question like what could AI do to improve our outcomes?
yes, 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 yes. And the way you said it, the way I interpreted it was you said most people will say start with AI policy, which I took that as yeah, that's a great place to start, perhaps, but I think there's a better place to start. But maybe I
Yeah.
just yeah.
No, it's a good place to start. I prefer to start with the framework myself, but policy is a good place to start because it forces everybody to start thinking about it. And that's the main reason that people will lead with that is because there's a certain urgency around that where it's like, look, I don't know what we're doing with AI, but we better figure out what's appropriate and what isn't, or we're going to get in trouble. So it's a good like tip of the spear to start action because there's a certain fear around it that's easier, that's leverageable. So I think that's the main reason that policy, is what usually it starts with and where it can be useful.
Okay. What's the biggest reason people, companies hesitate to bring in an AI consultant like you? Is it we're not ready? AI will replace our people?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so there's sort of two categories here. So one of them is head in the sand, and that is, this is too scary. I'll deal with it tomorrow. It's not really going to change that much. I don't want to disrupt our people. Um, you know, like that whole category, right? So look, the pain will be great enough at some point for people who are in that situation where they're going to have to face it. So it's fine. Those are all future customers of some AI enablement consultant, right? Um, the second category is, you know what? We got this really smart guy who knows everything about AI here. Like he's going to take care of it. Don't worry about it. So the sort of internal expert thing. And this goes a little bit to what I was saying about like nobody has more than 2 years more, worth of experience or more than 2 years of experience in this space. And that actually is a fine strategy given how young the industry is. But, and here's the big but, as soon as you have even 5 of these projects under your belt where you've seen patterns that emerge across these companies 5 different times, you're going to be infinitely more valuable to that next company in solving their problem than their internal AI expert. Like this really truly is a game where sample size matters. You know what I mean? This is true across all areas of expertise, right? You don't want to be, you don't want to go in and be the plastic surgeon's first nose job ever, like you want this person to have done this 100 times. This is why, I always tell people this is why therapists are so valuable. Like I'm having this intense personal problem. I've got a really smart friend who's giving me advice on it, but they've only seen this once. My therapist has seen this 200 times. Like who's going to have the better pattern matching, the better ability to sort of, help me see around the corner. So it's the same thing here. Nothing to, by the way, if you can, what happens in this is if you can leverage that internal AI expert, become friends with them and collaborate, they're going to be your best friend and the most important internal resource you have because they know the business better than you do. But having that pattern matching is incredibly valuable, and that ends up being the primary way to make your value known.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's such a cool way to look at it because initially, for a short window here, the teenager is going to have the better the better insights
Yeah,
or comparable insights to our consultant, but quickly the consultant is going to have worked on enough projects
yeah.
that it's going to be
And
exponential.
this is why those teenagers 10 years from now are going to be so unstoppable with AI, is that they will have picked it up at the very beginning and experimented with it. I just finished Bill Gates' memoir about the first, bit of his life. And this was the big theme. It was like he had exposure to a set of things and developed a set of skills at a critical time when nobody else really had them. Like you know, he was at the beginning of the original, computer revolution on day zero, just like AI day zero was, 2 years ago. So, we miss that. You and I miss being there at day zero on the AI revolution, but there's a whole lot of people that made a whole lot of big businesses, who didn't start until 2 or 3 or 5 years into the PC revolution. So we're fine.
Yeah. Okay. Good. 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 Okay. Tell me a story, a business that was on the fence but took the leap into AI implementation. What shifted? What results came from it?
Yeah. So, I'll tell you one that I actually just heard about that was pretty interesting. Um, so this was actually a fairly large company, and it was a company in the healthcare space. So they were on the, what do they call that? The provider side. So you got payers, which is the insurers, and providers that do the healthcare. And they were, very large private company that was looking to go public. They, what's interesting about these stories, by the way, I'll just say this real quick as a caveat. Again, we're only 2 years into this. So the number of stories about, people who've successfully done this and had a big outcome as a result is fairly small because it's just happening like right now. Like give me 12 months and I'll have like 15 more of these. But anyway, so what these guys did, they were quite a bit ahead of the curve. And they, were doing the consolidation game, so picking up other medical offices and stuff as they grew. They brought in an AI. You would really call them an enablement consultant, right? It was a bigger firm that does this kind of work. And I'd mentioned before that the bigger firms kind of sniffed this out earlier than anybody else. So this was one of the bigger firms. They put together over about 3 months a really robust AI transformation plan. So that's the plan for AI-ifying the entire business. And they started it and they got about 10% of the way into that transformation. So just did the very basic stuff. They deployed some AI chat agents and a little bit better IVR. That's the call center systems where everybody calls and then hits 0000 operator, right? So they did some AI on that improved that pretty dramatically. They actually doubled their valuation in that period, like 2x'd it. just by having a good plan and 10% of that plan accomplished. And this is big business. We're talking like, couple $100 million, expanding up to over 350, 375. That was the way the market responded to the, writing on the wall about what AI is likely to do for this business. They didn't even have to develop, the full enablement plan or deploy the full plan in order to get the market benefit of that transformation. So that's an interesting example. Again, there's going to be dozens and dozens, hundreds of these for companies, small, medium, and large. I will also say that we're going to see examples of companies that basically wouldn't have existed without AI. So think solo mid-sized software companies, right? One person with, let's say, a $40 million a year software company. That's a class of business that could not exist prior to AI that will exist in maybe 3 or 4 years. So that's, a success story that's just starting somewhere in somebody's garage, like literally right now. That, I mean, like literally, like let's put it on the calendar. I guarantee that in 5 years, those will be fairly commonplace.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Wild, right?
Wow. Yeah. Holy mackerel. Okay. You've got a sharp eye for structure. Let's break down your actual framework step by step. How does an AI enablement consultant help a company go from AI curious to actually executing?
Yeah. Great question. So, the first place you start is where you would start with any project, which is stakeholder buy-in, right? Just a fancy way of saying if the people who are driving the ship don't care about the project, it's not going to go anywhere, especially for something like AI enablement, which by its very nature has to sort of peek under every single rock and into every single, corner of the business, to look for opportunities. So the single best way to do that is to have a really candid conversation and ideally a really punchy presentation about AI disruption. So that's where I always start. And I start with some examples about, really amazing things that AI is doing, really destructive things that AI has done and how that scares us, how to think about, the relationship between those things, how to think about where AI is going to be over the next couple of years. Like I spend a lot of time, some time in this, talking about exponential growth. Like we're as humans, we're not wired to perceive, to grok exponential growth. Like it just doesn't make sense. And so you have to use other tools, or heuristics or thought experiments to paint the picture of what exponential growth with something like AI looks like. Simple example of that is you should assume that the cost of using AI will go to zero and the speed of its responsiveness will go to infinity. Now, is it actually going to go to zero and infinity? No, but assume that for the purposes of thinking through what's going to happen to your business. In the example of early internet, right? The people who assumed that the cost of bandwidth was going to go to zero and that the speed of bandwidth was going to go to infinity, they won. Why did they win? Because they created things like YouTube, which at the time made zero sense. Bandwidth's too expensive. There's not enough. It's too slow. You can't play video on the internet. Are you kidding me? Well, the people who assumed infinity and zero had the vision to say it's going to be fast enough. I don't know when, but it will be. So same heuristic, same thought experiment with AI. So I lead with that because you want people to be shocked. You want them to have a new framework for thinking about what's coming and why it might be important. And you want them to be a little bit scared because it is scary. And the cost of not doing anything about it right now is extremely high. So that's where I start. The stakeholder buy-in with a sort of, let's call it shock and awe style presentation on AI and where it's headed. So that's the first part. And then the second part is that mapping that I described. So the framework for, really understanding where the opportunities are to to create leverage in the business using AI. And even if you're in a business where your core product or service can be delivered by AI, better by AI, that mapping ends up being important because it starts to paint the picture for you about the various components that you're going to need in order to, compete with some of the AI first people in your space, and where you might have sort of, any kind of strategic advantage, right? So like I'm working with a very large traditional BPO. Those are the companies that provide, mostly human agents for solving customer support issues to large companies. Obviously, lots of possibility of disruption there as AI agents take some of those jobs. Also, huge opportunities for companies like that because of things like trust issues, compliance, the need for having humans in the loop. Like one thing these very large AI companies don't have is a bench of 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 agents that can backstop an AI if it runs into problems in a customer conversation. So that kind of thing starts to be illuminated when you apply that framework where you're breaking down the functional areas of the business and mapping out what the business does. There are two ways, just sort of to paint the picture structurally, that I do that. One is by department, as I described before, and the other is to look at it from a customer journey perspective. So what does that mean? Well, if I'm in a business, let's say a software company, and I sell subscriptions to that software, the customer journey, if I were to map that out, starts with somebody not knowing anything about me. Then they hear about me. Then they think it's kind of interesting. Then they have a conversation with me. Then they do a trial. Then they explore the tool and see what it's about. Then they pay for it and become a customer. Then maybe they have a problem and they need to interact with the support team. Then maybe they upgrade. Then maybe they eventually churn, right? So that's the customer journey. And if I map it out that way, I can actually, so the customer is above the line, company below the line. I can see all of the business functions that happen that map to that customer journey that need to happen internally in order to support the customer journey, right? It actually turns out to be a really good way to figure out where the gaps in your org are as well, because you can look at that and go, God, we're not doing anything at this stage. What are we thinking, right? But it also is a really great map for AI. Like, hey, in this stage where they know about us and they're coming to kick the tires, what if we had an AI bot lead them through, the product? Could we change the conversion numbers on that? So that's another lens. So you do the department lens or the customer journey lens. That turns into a list of possible AI optimizations. There's a scoring mechanism you can use after that to figure out where to prioritize or what to try to deploy to create change first. And then you go into execution and you work down that list in ranked, priority. And that priority is, I don't know if you've heard of the ICE framework, but it's a product development framework where you try to estimate the impact that this thing is going to have, how confident you are that it's going to have that impact, and the effort, like how, or the ease, like how easy is it, right? So high number on impact, on confidence and ease is a high priority item, right? If you're lower confidence and it's not very easy, that's going to fall down the scale. So you use that and then you just start going down the list, and then it is iterate, test, measure. That didn't work. Throw it out. Next, test, measure. That did work. Can we optimize a little bit more? Test, measure. Yeah, a little bit more. Great. Okay. Let's deploy. And you just keep going. A lot of that last phase actually can be done by the team, because what you've done is you've handed over the playbook and said, this is the way to do it from here. And good luck, and I'll see you next year. Is that about what you're looking for?
Oh my God. That's incredible. And here's the consulting contract.
That's right. Exactly.
I'll see you in 6 months.
See you in 6 months. Godspeed.
Have your team execute.
Yeah.
Oh,
And of course, of course, teams need, ongoing interaction after that. Like it's if you're an individual, person on the enablement side, you're mostly working with internal teams and helping source people who can do the stuff if they want. these larger firms have armies of people who will go and do all this enablement and the testing themselves, but that costs a lot of money to do that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I that was awesome. I just round of applause there.
Excellent. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. You've got 24 hours to live and your soul's stuck in a SaaS product. What is it and why?
It's stuck in a SaaS product. Well, you know what? I mean, if I wasn't sure whether this is supposed to be a utopian or dystopian vision, but I would actually put myself in, I think I would put myself in Chat GPT if I'm allowed to do that. So, and maybe Claude, I wasn't sure. I'm not really sure about whether it's Claude or Chat GPT. I like Claude better for coding, but I don't know that I'd be coding in the last 24 hours. So here's my sort of weird spiritual take on LLMs, which is, there's a lot of hand wringing about like, oh my God, we've created this monster. Like this is, I don't know, for the ultra religious types, it might even be like, hey, this is the work of the devil. Like this is some pretty serious stuff here, right? And I get it. I mean, it is eerie that a machine can respond in the way that it can with the level of precision and understanding and the access to knowledge and whatever. So here's my kind of weird spiritual take on it, which is if you wanted to have a conversation with source or with the entire collected conscious experience of humanity, right? If you wanted to do that, you could do a lot worse than interacting with an agent that's been trained on every single thing that's ever been written in the history of the world, right? Right. I mean, that's what we're talking about with these LLMs. Like, so there is sort of this weird theological, spiritual aspect to this that I actually haven't seen that many people talk about. That is pretty fascinating. And so, as somebody who's like deeply curious and has a spiritual life and pursuits myself, I would park myself in Chat GPT and continue the journey. And I mean that like not in terms of like looking up interesting SaaS product ideas, continuing the journey, but in terms of deepening my exploration of the infinite and of spirit and of history and of all the and consciousness and all the crazy things that I'm interested in. So that's my answer.
It's a good one.
Yeah, well, thank you.
What's the weirdest ritual you have before making a big decision?
Mm. Well, you know what? I mean, gosh, this is terrible that I'm double dipping, but I have actually started to use ChatGPT to inform most of my decisions. And I think that's kind of weird. So what's my weirdest ritual? It's like talking to a computer about my choices, right? So, I mean, I've gone far enough down the rabbit hole with this. I didn't think that I've gone so far as to say, hey, make this choice for me. I can't figure it out. Like, I'll do whatever you say, right? Um, I just thought of another weird ritual. I haven't done this in a while, but this was another really good one. So this was for small decisions that are more inconsequential, but I just can't figure out, like, do I want to go to the movie or do I want to get Chinese food? So there's this app that's called Universe Splitter. So Universe Splitter, if you know anything about quantum mechanics and quantum weirdness, they're at the bottom of it all. And this is really weird. And I certainly, I don't know that I even know it well enough to explain it, but wouldn't have time to do it anyway. So there are a couple of different explanations for the observed and validated math around quantum stuff. So one of them is that when a quantum event happens, and that's various things, but think about like the decay of a single radioactive atom. Okay. When that happens, one explanation of what we observe is that the universe splits in two. So we have one universe where the radioactive element spit off it decayed, and one where it didn't. So now we have two universes, and that these quantum events are happening all the time. So universes are just propagating like wild, right? So there's this, there are various ways, and there's no scientific equipment that you can use to actually force a quantum event to happen. You can actually shoot a photon at a half silvered mirror and it'll either reflect or it won't. But that's a quantum event that turns out to, if you believe in the universe splitting thing, create two universes every time you run the experiment. So bear with me here. Universe Splitter is an app that connects to a quantum machine in Switzerland, one of these devices, and you put into the app, you say, here are the things I'm trying to figure out whether to do. I'm going to either go to a movie or I'm going to get Chinese food. And if you commit that no matter what the thing says, you're going to do that thing, it runs, goes to Switzerland, initiates the quantum event. And if you believe in the multi-universe thing here, two universes are created, one in which you go to get Chinese food and one in which you go to a movie. So I actually used that for small decisions for quite a while, just because I thought it was amazing to have this concept that I was like spinning off different universes and selves doing these different paths, right? So is that weird enough?
That was amazing.
Yeah, I know
That is,
that's a weird one. Universe,
oh,
or go check it out. It's a real thing. I mean, it sounds like total science fiction, but there's real basis in science here. That's just bizarre.
the universe splitter. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. You're given $10 million to launch a cult.
Mhm.
What's the core belief?
What's the core belief? Oh, let me think about that one. Boy, that's a hard question. $10 million to start a cult. What's the core belief? I mean, I think I'm going to go like good cult, Um, and I'll tell you what, uh, I think it would be pretty amazing. So, you and I know something about recovery and about 12-step programs and that kind of thing. So, a case could be made that the 12 steps are one of the most important innovations of the 20th century. And just as a pathway to personal growth, no matter what your vices, your problems or not, right? If everybody in the world did the 12 steps, I think the world might be a better place. So I would say a cult that's based on the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, where the core beliefs are really some of the recovery principles that came out of that early work in the recovery world, where you don't have to have, burned your life down with drugs or alcohol or gambling or whatever to come into this thing. That you're doing it because they're sustainable and eternal spiritual principles that are worth organizing around. And I add to that the 12 traditions because um, that is a kind of an operating system document that was created that is one of the most incredible innovations, I think, in the history of group psychology, because it allows for leaderless organizations to evolve and to flourish. So no, no gurus, like none of hopefully none of the problems of, letting one person become too powerful, whatever, like the 12 traditions solve that in such an insane and beautiful way. So that would be it. A cult based on the 12 steps and the 12 traditions in recovery circles.
Wow. I have never thought of the 12 traditions from the standpoint of it allows leaderless organizations to flourish. I guess
Yeah.
already knew it. I mean, I always knew it, but
Yeah.
to internalize that idea, that's good.
Right. Well, I mean, just think, even if you look at, so, of course, that all came out of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's an institution that has been governed by the 12 traditions and has never had a power, uh, problem where one person took it over and, I mean, of course, everything in that humans touch ends up being political at some level, but the traditions have continued to sort of guide and direct that for what are we at, almost 100 years, right? 90 years, something like that.
Yeah, that's good. I also think too, it's a much better way than saying it. of like anarchy. Like some people
Yeah,
are
yeah,
like,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
that was
yeah.
anarchy, but
Well, and
well,
that
not really.
and by the way, when people say anarchy and they're saying it in a good way or positive way, they kind of mean that. They mean, headless. They mean that nobody is able to attain and retain that kind of power. It's just that without any governing principles, like anarchy is anarchy.
Yeah. Okay. What's a contradiction you live with every day and have learned to make peace with?
So I would say that it is um, that out of what is like objectively meaninglessness comes a lot of meaning. And here's what I mean by that. So you don't have to um dig too far to like really, really get close to our relative insignificance, right? Like if you look at us in comparison to the size of the state of California, we're insignificant. And zoom out one click, and now it's Earth. We're really insignificant. And Earth is so insignificant in the solar system. And the solar system is so unbelievably insignificant in the context of the Milky Way. And guess what? The Milky Way is one galaxy off to this little sort of dusty corner of this larger cluster of millions of galaxies, right? So there's this kind of undeniable insignificance, and it's there like in terms of scale. It's also there in terms of time, right? So like if you look at the length of a human life, even on geologic time, Earth time, 4 billion years, I think, 3.5, something like that. It's nothing. Like it's absolutely nothing. If you look at it over the history of humanity, it's still nothing, right? If you look at it in comparison to how many people there are in the world and have been, it's nothing. Like I don't know what the total number of humans that have ever lived is, maybe 15 or 20 or 30 billion or something. Like one of that, like it's terrible. So there's this sort of objective, like absolute insignificance. And like out of that, this crazy opportunity to find and explore and deepen and appreciate meaning, right? And one of the ways that I think about that is I have this sort of image of like somebody like standing on this precipice, like staring into the void, like singing at it, saying, this is significant, this is meaningful. And it is because I say it is, because, I'm taking this moment to create in spite of the fact that it's ephemeral and is going to be gone like that. So that's the contradiction. And I think it's like, it's big and it's beautiful and a little scary, and can be, fuel for nightmares at the same time as it is like fuel for great joy. So, yeah, so that's my answer.
It's a good one. I'm all in on that answer too.
Good.
What's the pettiest reason you ever didn't work with someone?
Pettiest reason I didn't work for someone. You think about that. Pettiest reason didn't work with someone. Um, I think this is going to go back to high school, college. Yeah, college. Yeah, there was somebody that I worked in a kitchen like in college, doing the dishes and such, and which I highly recommend. Good character building exercise. And there was a guy that I did not want to work with because he was dating the girl that I liked. And that was just too much for me. I just couldn't handle it. I was going to punish him by not working with him, and that was pretty petty. Every time we're in the
that's
same swap with somebody else.
that's amazing. Okay, you can pick from these two. What question are you afraid someone might ask you on a podcast? Or, yep, or if I had access to your inner monologue for 24 hours, what would surprise me the most?
Those are good questions. So the funny thing is that the first question, if I answer it, that's just the question. And the question is, are you going to ask that question? Right. So that's that one. That's clever, right? It's a good one. Um, I think, let's see. I think that I think it's the second one. I think it would answer that one. So I got an adult ADHD diagnosis a couple of years ago. It was a really surprising thing for me. Um, because I didn't ever think of myself as being well, first of all, neuroatypical and necessarily that way, but certainly didn't fit what I thought of as the typical ADHD diagnosis. Um, I learned so much about there was it helped me to really explain a lot of things that have happened in my life, the way that I think, the way that I operate, the way that, where I thrive and where I struggle. And by the way, as a side note on that, what I learned about it is that the attention deficit bit doesn't mean that I don't have attention. It means that I don't get to choose where to direct it the same way that other people do. So I can become completely tunnel vision obsessed with something and I can't tear my attention away. I don't have control over where I'm going to put my attention. So like 8 hours later, I'll kind of like get up and like go like, oh my God, what did I just do? And, I forgot to eat and, whatever. Right. And then meanwhile, like I may have the important thing I need to do and not be able to shift my attention to it. Um, so all of which is to say, you would be probably surprised, at just how rabbit holey my thinking is in any 24-hour period. And how it jumps around. Maybe after this podcast, you wouldn't be surprised by that, but how much it jumps between sort of themes and ideas and, oh, let me explore that some more. Oh my God, that's kind of like this thing over here in the Netherlands. Oh, wow. When I think about the Netherlands, there's that Dutch thing with that person. I wonder if they're still doing the internet podcast about the thing over there. And, just like, it just sort of keeps going and going and going and going. Like the free association that happens. So like it's a minor miracle that anything I'm saying right now is even somewhat intelligible given all that noise. So that's what you would be surprised to find. I don't think you'd want to be there more than like 20 minutes, let alone 24 hours.
Let me out.
Exactly. No.
I changed my mind.
Yeah, exactly. With the eject button.
Okay. Have you ever made a decision that made you physically sick, but you did it anyway?
Yeah. I mean, lots. Lots, lots. Well, I'll tell you. So one of the other things that I think is a little bit of a function of the ADHD bit is, I would characterize it as like, I have a hard time getting started, but when I'm started, I have a hard time stopping. Right. So basically it's a gear changing problem that I have more than, that I'm too lazy or too hyperactive. Right. It's hard for me to switch lanes. So every single day, at some point early in the morning, I need to do something really hard and uncomfortable. And that gives me a pit in my stomach every time I do it. And for me, first thing in the morning, I'm sorry, doing something really uncomfortable when I'm not sort of primed, when I'm not going, it means I'm at a standstill and I need to start. It's usually just super stupid and mundane. It's like calling that guy back that I haven't called. Like I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't want to make this call. I know he hates me. It's going to be awful. Like, I can't do this. Can I just do this tomorrow? And I get that like physical, sensation. And I need to do one or two of those. And then the pump is primed and then it's fine. Then I'm off to the races and then I can call everybody and not have any issues with it. I call it my frog eating practice because Mark Twain, do you know his whole thing about, if you're going to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning, right? And if you're going to eat two frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first, right? So that's my frog eating practice. And literally it's a physical, visceral response every single morning.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's real.
Okay, what's last one? What's something you've never told your wife?
For my wife. I don't, so I think I mean, there's a bunch of stuff about my childhood. Like I was thinking about this the other day. This is um probably something I've never told her just because it never really came up. So I used to play Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, and was just obsessed with it. Like I just really loved it, and would hole up for hours. Even if there was nobody else to play with, I would just read the books and prepare all the characters and the adventures and whatever. So at some point along the road, maybe I was like 12 or so years old at that point. So I was also like I was a very cerebral kid, but I was also very sensitive. Like I was very attuned to the way people felt and whatever. And so there was this stretch where I got really, really upset about the orcs that we were killing in this campaign. And it was awful because I was like, these orcs, like they probably have families. There's probably like baby orcs at home. And like I just killed their dad. Like this is terrible. I'm a terrible person. I got really upset about it and really it was heartbreaking to me. So that's actually become one of I've got a list I call the foundational stories that are these funny little things that like are windows into like who I am. That most of them were in childhood, some of them young adulthood, and that's one of my foundational stories. And I don't think I've ever told my wife that.
Okay. That was relatively benign, but horrifying at the same time.
Yeah. It's the best I could do on short notice.
Yes, yes. Okay. Okay. Let's call this a callback prompt.
Okay.
Earlier, you talked about the mistakes from the .com era. If you had your current AI consultancy framework back then, what part of it would have helped you most?
Um, Realistically, it's that the evaluation framework, right? Because that's something that applies anytime you're looking at the impact of a new innovation or new technology on a business broadly. So this is the case anytime you're looking at, I think we're referred to as general purpose technologies. So not something that's super specific and narrow to solving one very narrow problem, but a general purpose thing that can apply to lots of, so computers are general purpose technologies. The internet's general purpose technology. Actually, blockchain happens to be a general purpose technology. AI certainly is. So anytime you're dealing with the disruption of general purpose technologies, that framework where you either look by functional area in the business or you look by customer journey, you map and you think through the implications of this new general purpose technology, it works perfectly. In fact, I don't know this, but I very strongly suspect that people use, versions of that in digital transformation the first time around.
Beautiful. I was just thinking Chat GPT or whatever, Claude or whatever you like, whatever your AI chatbot is of choice, or whatever we're calling this AI chat model of choice. Um,
Yeah.
I've built out this show template that's
Mhm.
created for me in ChatGPT, a project. It's amazing, and it spit out a bunch of these questions, which I thought were amazing, and they were perfectly suited towards our conversation,
Mhm.
especially this sort of the last 5 or 10 that I just went through. But I'm looking at Chat GPT, and so I've got all these different like chats that end with, "Oh my God, that was amazing." And then they ask you, "Well, you want me to do this?" And I think, "Yes, I do, but I'll get back to it." So
Mm.
I'm thinking of all these chat windows or prompts, or what do we call those? Like a sequence. Uh,
Yeah, chats. Yeah.
yeah, all these different chats that are primed for this like ultimate, awesomeness, that are just sitting there hanging, waiting. And it,
Yeah. The potential.
yeah, potential. And it would be fun to take like a day and go back through all the prompts and go, "Yes, show me what's next," and see what
Right,
it
on
is.
each one of them. Yeah, on each
Yeah.
one of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be really cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of cool things you can that you can do and explore that there's new ways of thinking about all this that are coming out of, how these chats are structured, and, things like memory, like chat GPT now has sort of an enhanced memory capability that, allows for sort of cross chat awareness. That's sort of interesting. Yeah. So I think there's a ton of really, it's almost like evolving a new subculture right now around chats and prompt engineering and tweaking and tuning, and how are people using this, what's working, what isn't. Like it's sort of this collective exploration of what's possible with this new stuff.
I'm listening to Yuval Noah Harari's 21 Lessons for the
Yeah,
21st Century.
it's
Have
a
you
great
read
one.
that book yet?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, but he was just talking, what this was written in 2019, and
right.
some of his ideas now that he was talking about then, you kind of seeing them come to fruition, but they're still very relevant as to what's to come. I believe it was a very
Yeah,
forward thinking book.
yeah,
He was talking about, and it got me thinking about, you've got a company like Meta that has how many users these days? 4 billion or something like that.
yeah. Pretty much all of us. Most of us are on twice.
And that this idea of what it has access to come up with marketing or psychology around humans, or just through all of the posts and the pictures and all this. It at one I was fairly I don't know if disturbed is the right word, but I had a moment of clarity of like, oh yeah, big data. I get it. Big
Yeah,
data. Like Meta is big data. They have access to like lots of data that could make
everything. Yeah,
everything.
yeah. They really do. Yeah, yeah. His next book, by the way, is called Nexus, and it talks even more about that. It's about networks basically, and about the characteristics of interconnectedness, and has a lot to do with. There's a lot of data stuff in there for sure.
Yeah. We could keep going on and on and on. I want to be cognizant of your time. This has been a ton of fun. Uh, Inevitably, when I come to the point of hitting stop, was there anything you were hoping to say that maybe you didn't get to say, or anything like that that pops into your head?
I don't think so. I mean, this is pretty wide ranging, and I think we covered. I mean, I covered the orc story, so that was the main thing I wanted to get out of the way in this one. It's just been weighing on me for so long that it was nice to just get that off of my heart. So, uh, no, I don't think so. It's been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And I had the thought, the moment of clarity, as I've built out the episode project in Chat GPT, how it gave me the bulk of the show flow of this.
Mm.
I can go back with the transcript
Oh yeah,
and say, give me interview number two,
oh yeah. I was just
right?
gonna suggest that, feed it back in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Like, what didn't we cover? Chat GPT.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I love
interesting.
it.
Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
do
So
it.
it,
Episode 2. I'm in.
okay, amazing. We'll do it for sure. All right. Anybody listening, watching, if you're listening to this and thinking, I need help making AI real in my business without getting overwhelmed by the hype, John and I are exploring ways to support founders and leaders just like you. You can connect with John on LinkedIn. You can feel free to shoot me a message via LinkedIn as well. We're happy to brainstorm, advise, or point you in the right direction. I will put John's LinkedIn in the show notes. Uh, you want to tell him how to find you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, if you just searched for John Girard, there's only a couple of us. I'm the one without any hair, and yeah, I think you should be able to find it pretty quickly. And also, happy to share these frameworks. I mean, I've got a couple of them kind of written out in ways that are quite approachable. Anybody who wants them can take them. So just yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. And I'm on LinkedIn as Misha Z. Of course, you can just search Misha Zvagansoff on LinkedIn. I pop up pretty quick, and I'm the opposite. I have lots of hair at this age. Most people are surprised. Anyway, did not mean to go down that rabbit hole. Um, that's a wrap on this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. Big thanks to you, John Girard, for bringing the clarity, calm, and killer insights. If this episode sparks something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it and connect with John on LinkedIn to go deeper. Until next time, stay focused, stay bold, and let's go speak on some podcasts. I'm going to hit stop. We'll say goodbye offline. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. For resources to help you sell your stuff, go to belove.media/resources. That's belove.media/resources. And be sure to subscribe, comment, 5-star, and share. Thank you again for listening.